was simply the best. Tributes to the legendary Tina Turner.
Who needs a heart when a heart can be broken?
The queen of rock and roll's influence on music.
Rolling on the river.
And how she overcame abuse and inspired millions. Also on this Wednesday night, Canadians sinking deeper into debt, the new warning from the country's housing agency, and the advice to people struggling to pay the bills. Florida's governor enters the race for the White House, his unconventional declaration. And life returns to normal for some Albertans.
Just awesome.
Why not all fire evacuees are eager to go back home.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with sad news about singer Tina Turner, who has died at the age of 83 after a long illness. She started performing as a teenager and was still a superstar decades later, belting out one rock and roll hit after another. At age 60, Turner became the biggest selling concert artist in the world. Her high energy, uninhibited style earning her the title of Queen of Rock and Roll and inspiring the next generation of artists. Turner did not sail easily into fame. She spent years in an abusive relationship with her first husband, Ike, finally escaping it and finding even greater success as a solo artist, proving she could hold her own against any man. Mike Drolet looks at her extraordinary life.
Where's Tina? Live Aid was less a duet for Tina Turner as it was a coronation. She'd been a rock and roll pioneer in the 60s whose star began to fade in the 70s. But when she took the stage with Mick Jagger in 1985, there was no question. Tina Turner was the undisputed queen of rock.
Tina Turner will go down in history as one of the most badass singers in the history of rock. There was no one like her, and there won't be anybody like her ever again.
Ike and Tina Turner seemed to have it all. Tina, with all that frenetic energy, drove their band to stardom. At home, life with the controlling and abusive Ike was dramatically different.
And you left me on the highway, drove on.
By the time she got up the courage to ask for a divorce, she only wanted one thing, her name, which Ike had trademarked as a way of controlling her.
There were three things that were valuable to Tina Turner. One was that raspy voice that nobody else had. Second were her legs, which she had insured for $3.2 million. And third was that name, Tina Turner, the one that Ike gave her. And in order to get out from underneath his thumb when she went solo, she had to give up everything that she had earned to that point so she could get away from Ike.
She left with 36 cents in her pocket, but she was free. Musically, she struggled as a solo artist until 1984, when she reinvented herself as a star on MTV.
What's love got to do with it?
By the time she appeared in the movie Mad Max, she was unstoppable.
And the law says, bust the deal, face the wheel.
Her life was turned into a biopic, a musical, and a best-selling memoir.
I had an abusive life. There's no other way to tell the story.
By not shying away from her past, she became an inspiration to female artists everywhere.
Tina rocks. You know, she's my hero and my icon, and it was just crazy. I went in the room and I just, I bawled because I couldn't believe it, really.
She was the queen of rock and roll. High heels, big hair, and an even bigger voice. Tina Turner made it look easy, even when life was hard.
You're simply the best.
Mike Drolet, Global News.
Turner's representative says she died peacefully at her home near Zurich, Switzerland, after a long illness. She leaves us all her greatest work, her music. Now to other news. There is a new warning about how much debt Canadians are carrying, and high house prices are largely to blame. According to the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, Canada now has the highest level of household debt in the G7, and mortgages make up about 3/4 of that debt. Rising interest rates only add to the burden of those struggling to pay bills. And as Eric Sorensen reports, it also makes Canada vulnerable to a global economic crisis.
Even as housing prices skyrocket across the country, Canadians are looking for ways to take on the debt necessary to own a home. Mortgages make up the lion's share of Canadians' household debt, and it's only getting harder to finance.
I have noticed a big difference in I used to see a lot more friends purchasing homes. It's pretty rare now.
Kate Madower is a nurse.
I'm a single income right now, so I'm just doing my little rent right now and putting money aside, but that has become more challenging.
The problem, Canada's population growth has made housing more scarce and unaffordable.
There's a lot of debt going into buying housing, and that's because there's not a lot of housing available. So we need a dramatic increase in housing supply in order to try and address this. People are just paying too much for housing.
Canadians' capacity and willingness to finance debt is almost unparalleled. Among G7 countries, as far back as 2010, Canada had the greatest household debt, 95% as a share of GDP. By 2021, household debt for some countries has climbed, though for those closest to Canada's levels, the US and the UK, the percentage has dropped. Yet in Canada, the numbers have shot up to 107% as a share of GDP. In other words, Canada's household debt is greater than the size of the country's entire economy. And with the sharp rise in interest rates, Canadians are facing even higher levels of debt.
They benefited for a long period of time from very low interest rates without having taken this sort of hit to their balance sheet. But now they're feeling the impact of that decade and a half of debt accumulation now coming up against higher interest rates and the impact that's having on their household budgets.
Next, imagine if there's a global downturn in the economy. Not something CMHC is predicting, but many Canadians are ill prepared to pay their debts if they lose their jobs.
If the economy goes south, handling or paying off all of this debt is going to be extremely painful and will be a severe problem for the Canadian economy.
How to deal with mounting debt?
I would say definitely being more strict in budgeting.
So minimize spending and maybe hold on to your money for now, says Cole Knocker.
Someone who's looking to save for a house, honest to God, wait. I would just wait.
Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
With just days to go before Alberta chooses its next government, a controversial figure is taking aim at Premier and United Conservative Party leader Danielle Smith. Preacher Arthur Pawlowski, who was found guilty of mischief for encouraging truckers at the Coots border blockade, held a press conference today on the steps of the legislature to denounce Smith.
This person is not representing our values. She is not conservative. She is as liberal an NDP as you can be.
The nature of his relationship with Smith was called into question when a phone call between the two was made public in March. Pawlowski and the Premier discussed the COVID-19 charges he was facing. And late last week, Smith was found guilty of violating conflict of interest rules in relation to that phone call. It's just one twist in an election campaign that Smith's NDP opponent says is all about trust. Heather Urix-West is with me from Calgary. Heather, is this likely to sway voters who support the UCP?
Well, Donna, Pawlowski may have been part of the group that helped Danielle Smith narrowly win the UCP leadership with promises for amnesty for COVID violators and rights protections for those opposed to vaccines. But he's not speaking for the majority of her longtime supporters in denouncing her today. Take Back Alberta leaders say he doesn't speak for them. Albertans, however, may still have questions about judgment, why Smith took his phone call or spoke to the Justice Minister on Pawlowski's behalf in the first place. And it's fair to wonder how much this latest strange twist will move undecided voters.
It is simply wild that this is all circulating in the middle of an election campaign. And while it has made a difference, that's why the election is closed, it doesn't appear to be disqualifying.
Now, there is no denying there is a lingering hangover from the pandemic among many people in this province, and not just from those angry about restrictions. The healthcare system spent years under siege, and that's made the future of healthcare the #1 ballot issue heading into voting day.
Danielle Smith wants to dismantle public health care and force you to pay to see a doctor.
In a province where politics was once about pipelines.
And I believe no one should ever have to pay out of pocket to see a family doctor.
Health care now reigns supreme, and post-pandemic, things are a mess.
3 years. I've been on a list.
We're even getting to a point now where emergency rooms are closing.
We have one obstetrician and gynecologist in Lethbridge.
It was getting to the point where it was dangerous for me to drive.
Problems with healthcare aren't Alberta's alone, but within the province, the COVID years saw plenty of acrimony between healthcare workers and the Jason Kenney UCP. That conflict has had consequences.
Data from the Canadian Institute for Health Information, CIHI, shows that we lost more family physicians to net migration out than any other province in 2022.
Alberta's next government will need to bring those doctors back while working to address a backlog of deferred care.
The pain was excruciating.
Calgary stage actress Catherine Kurbis had been waiting for a hip replacement for nearly 2 years when a surgeon told her she'd have to wait at least 1 year more.
My husband immediately started looking at private surgeries because he knew how much pain I was in all the time.
So in March, Kurbis paid out of pocket to have her surgery in Toronto. According to the Canadian Institute of Health Information, Albertans had some of the longest waits for hip and knee surgery in 2022. In January, the United Conservative Party unveiled a plan to contract thousands of orthopedic procedures each year to a private surgical facility. Though CIHI says the impact of this move is not yet known.
A lot of the contracts have just most recently been signed, so it will be interesting to see its impact on both the waits and the numbers of people waiting for surgery.
The Alberta NDP, meanwhile, says it will address surgical wait times by expanding access solely within the public system. Two parties.
Our UCP team is improving healthcare
with two different plans.
Our Alberta NDP will fix healthcare.
Question for voters, who to believe. Heather Yurex West, Global News, Calgary.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, a man Danielle Smith has called a hero, is officially in. He has filed paperwork to enter the 2024 presidential race, and he's about to go public with it on a Twitter live stream with its billionaire owner, Elon Musk. It is an unusual way to make the announcement, but Twitter is what Donald Trump used to rally his base. Jackson Proskow reports.
I'm Ron DeSantis, and I'm running for president to lead our great American comeback.
It's no surprise Florida's governor wound up here. Ron DeSantis has spent years eyeing a much higher office.
I am not doing polls to tell me what to do or what to think.
But to get to the White House, DeSantis will first have to get past Donald Trump's iron grip on the Republican Party, selling himself as Trump without the baggage.
I think the party has developed a culture of losing.
He needs to sort of say, here's a flavor you haven't tried, but I'm going to be better and more satisfying in the long run than Donald Trump, and I can actually win the White House.
DeSantis has branded himself the ultimate culture warrior, passing anti-gay, anti-transgender, and anti-abortion laws in Florida.
The state of Florida is where woke goes to die.
While picking a fight with Disney, the biggest tourist draw in his state.
DeSantis has touched some hot-button cultural issues, but it looks to me like you need to touch some of the cultural issues in order to be able to win over the Republican electorate these days.
Winning over American voters will be tougher.
Stay tuned.
Opponents have branded him an authoritarian, while DeSantis is staying sheltered with a small base, launching his campaign via Twitter instead of a rally.
He wants to show that he's going to do something different because in the primary, he's running against predominantly an 80-year-old man. Should he make it through the primary, he's predominantly running against an 80-year-old man.
DeSantis and the other Republican contenders may not be banking on running a sustained campaign against former President Trump. Instead, they're likely positioning themselves to stand in should Trump's campaign be sidelined by legal woes. In that scenario, DeSantis would quickly become the frontrunner. For now, he still faces a very long and tough climb to the top. Donna?
Jackson Proskow in Washington tonight. Thanks, Jackson. Coming up, why some of Canada's opposition party leaders are rejecting an offer to view classified intelligence. The Canadian government and Saudi Arabia have appointed new ambassadors, the first step towards restoring full diplomatic ties and ending nearly 5 years of strained relations. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau met with the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman on the sidelines of the APEC summit in Bangkok last November. Their spat dates back to 2018 when Saudi Arabia recalled its ambassador and restricted trade after the Canadian embassy in Riyadh tweeted that Saudi Arabia should release women's rights activists being detained in the kingdom. The release yesterday of a report into foreign interference in Canada is not putting the issue to rest for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Opposition leaders are rejecting the former Governor General David Johnston's recommendations. Yesterday, he said no to a public inquiry and called on political leaders to unite on the issue. As our chief political correspondent David Akin explains, that report has only pushed the Prime Minister and his opponents farther apart.
We have offered to the leaders of all the parties in the House the capacity to get the security clearances necessary so that they can look at that raw intelligence themselves.
It was David Johnston's idea and one enthusiastically endorsed by Justin Trudeau. Give opposition leaders the same secrets Johnston based his report on. One opposition leader is in.
I will be receiving the top secret clearance to get the same information that Mr. Johnston received. I think that is what a responsible leader of an opposition party would do, and I will be doing that.
The other two are out.
It's a dumb trap. It's for those who are not very careful. They want to say, we offered you to see everything. You saw everything. You cannot say a word. This is a secret.
We're not going to allow the government to silence leaders of the opposition by swearing them to secrecy on this matter of grave public importance.
Trudeau says the Conservative leader is being irresponsible.
Poilievre is choosing to sit behind a veil of ignorance instead. He doesn't want the facts to get in the way of a good political argument or a personal attack.
Meanwhile, the government of China is watching all this. Beijing officials said Chinese interference in Canada's affairs is a, quote, fabrication intended to smear China, and the Canadians should just stop talking about it. Quote, just put an end to actions and words tarnishing China's image. Donna.
Okay, David Akin, thank you. Superstorm next. A typhoon sweeps its way through Guam. This is the first glimpse of the damage on Guam after it was hit by a super typhoon. The Category 4 storm slammed into the U.S. territory's northern tip, pummeling the western Pacific island. Winds reached 225 kilometers an hour. There was torrential rain and huge storm surges. Guam's governor is urging the island's 150,000 residents to remain indoors. The typhoon is the strongest storm to hit the U.S. territory in decades, and it sat over the island for more than 12 hours. Downed trees are everywhere, and there are fears of landslides and flash flooding. In the UK, a woman has died 2 weeks after being struck by a royal motorcade in London. 81-year-old Helen Holland was visiting her sister on May 10th when she was hit by a police motorcycle escorting Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, the sister-in-law of King Charles. A statement from Buckingham Palace says Sophie is deeply saddened by the news of Holland's death. Home sweet home next, the emotional return for Fox Creek residents. They say home is where the heart is, and for some Alberta residents, that's taking on a deeper meaning. Rain and cooler temperatures have slowed the wildfire activity enough for people from Fox Creek to go home. There is a lingering risk of a flare-up, but for now, most are enjoying a sense of relief and gratitude. Neethu Garcha reports on the emotional homecoming.
Returning residents in Fox Creek are getting a literal breath of fresh air. The thick smoke and haze that have blanketed the area for weeks is gone. So is the immediate threat from 2 wildfires burning nearby.
It's just nice to see people get back and, a lot of thumbs up, and it's just awesome.
For firefighter Wade Martineau, it's an emotional moment of reflection on what it took to get to this point.
Long haul, right? And, my house was in the line of fire too, and it was sprinklered, and, there was mornings didn't know if we were going to be going home to a house.
Martineau, his wife, and their son all volunteer together.
It's been a long haul, a lot of hard work, and to be able to serve with my family, proud.
Their family has lived in this community for decades. They say they're thankful for all the support their members have received from out-of-town crews supporting the firefight.
Those boys really stepped up and gave us a fighting chance to fight off this wildfire.
Yeah.
The ladies cooking for us.
The ladies. Yeah,
3 square meals a day.
In Whitecourt, where evacuees have been staying, there's gratitude for the hospitality over nearly 3 weeks and joy over being able to return home.
What's your reaction to that?
So happy. I know there's a lot of cleaning, but we're so excited to come home.
So guess what? I'm going home. How do you feel just hearing that news?
I feel really great.
Not everyone is rushing back, and those who are know to be on alert.
Good feeling that we can go home. The question is, should we? That's the way I look at it, because there's still 2 fires burning out of control.
I can foresee next week that, we're on evacuation alert and you have to pick up the pieces and go again.
We do remain on a 4-hour evacuation notice. There are still 2 active wildfires, quite close to our community.
With essential services up and running, there's relief and rejoicing. As they get a short reprieve from a long firefight likely to last through the summer. Neetu Garcha, Global News, Fox Creek, Alberta.
And that is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen.